Hi, I'm Michelle Boyd Waters, and I am a scholar of adolescent literacy, writing pedagogy, and student-centered learning. I'm also the owner of Rethink ELA, and I have I guess we could call it a reading resource for high school and middle school English teachers. It's called the Curated Short Stories Library, and I've been curating short stories for usage in secondary classrooms since about 2014. I started because I was a teacher looking for short stories to share with my students because I had already experienced several cases of them saying, "What? We're going to read how much? This is too long." And it was, in my opinion, short, but they didn't think so. Anyway, so I was looking for short stories and I was sitting in my office and scrolling through the internet and trying to find videos and printed texts and paired texts and essential questions and all the things to go along with the story to help entice them into reading the actual entirety of the short story and realized there wasn't anything where I could just go to one place and find this. And so I created that on my website and have been maintaining it ever since. But anyway, the reason why I'm telling you this is because one of the English teachers that is part of my community, a fifth grade teacher, sent me this question, and I wanted to address this and then also get some feedback from you. So, anyway, the question is, why are your stories all so dark? And I thought, that really is a good question. And so I did a little bit of research, and I've got, of course, got this all pulled up on my computer. And my response to this teacher, this educator, is that this is a good question. And I said the majority of these short stories are part of the traditional canon. That way, we don't have to work quite so hard to justify our use of them in the classroom. Anyway, the traditional canon, which often exhibits dark themes for a variety of reasons, reflecting both the historical context and interest in exploring the complexities of the human condition. I also said that short stories are much like fairy tales, of which the original versions are also explore the darker sides of life. And then I added also middle and high school students tend to love these stories much more than the lighter or tamer stories. They really get into works by Edgar Allan Poe, Roald Dahl, and Ray Bradbury. This might be because stories with these dark and dystopian themes allow us to explore our deepest, nameless fears within the safe context of pages and classrooms. The stories help us understand what we go through and also what others go through. And then I linked to several additional resources that are where I gleaned my responses from. And I thought I would share with you one article in particular. And this article, and I have it pulled up in my Zotero where I've highlighted it and collected all the metadata about it. Anyway, this article is called Understanding the Appeal of Dystopian Young Adult Fiction. So that perfectly addresses our question. It's by Justin Scholes and John Ostenson, and it was published in the winter 2013 issue of the Allen Review. This is available online. You can just read or search for the title and find it. But anyway, this article starts out saying, bestseller and teen choice lists of the last few years have seen numerous dystopian novels in their ranks, from the Hunger Games series to the Match trilogy and numerous standalone titles. So, yes, absolutely. It continues tapping into a long tradition in literature hallmarked by works such as Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World. The dystopian fiction seems to have found a home in the growing body of young adult or YA literature. And the authors continue. The rising popularity of dystopian fiction for teens has attracted even the attention of the New Yorker and the New York Times. Miller 2010, and I don't know how to pronounce this last name, but another article from 2010. While dystopian works have been part of YA literature since Lowry's The Giver and Sleater's House of Stairs, they've experienced a resurgent popularity in the past few years. And I would say that that popularity has continued. The authors say, as classroom teachers, we are constantly on the watch for books we can recommend to our students. So trends such as these matter to us. We want to be able to suggest good titles for our students to read outside of class, and we're interested in finding strong YA novels or short stories to study in the classroom. And they continue, the popularity of dystopian novels attracted our attention, So we set out to investigate these phenomenon, seeking to understand why teens found this genre so compelling and how we might take advantage of this in the classroom. And so this is a study that they've conducted, and I'm not going to get into the methodology or the type of study or anything, just kind of what the background is that they use to introduce this study and then also their findings. So first of all, we have to define dystopia. And so the authors say the concept of dystopia arose in the 20th century in response to such world events as the First World War, according to literary scholar Gary Cleese, I think, Claeys, from 2010, as a counter to earlier fiction utopias, which are depictions of idealized societies that promise a glorious future. Dystopian fiction instead satirizes utopian ideals or describes societies where negative social forces have supremacy. Um, Heinz and Ostry, writing specifically about children's literature in 2003, defined dystopias as societies where the ideals for improvement have gone tragically amok. A major premise of classic dystopian works is that humanity is the cause of its own nightmare situation. Whatever is run amok, government, technology, commercialization, society as a whole is to blame because of incompetence, consent, or complacency. Our study yielded some common elements in dystopian literature, revealing a core of heavy and provocative themes. Previously, this kind of literature was written for an adult audience that is presumed to understand the intricacies of social, political, and moral issues. And so the common elements in dystopian literature, according to these authors, are excessive measures to police society, unjust laws, pressure to conform, media manipulation and propaganda, measures to cover up flaws and lies within society, attempts to erase or revise society's history, suppression of the arts, limited or complete lack of individual freedom, division of people into privileged and unprivileged groups, little hope for change, human lives that are rote, meaningless, or inhuman, economic manipulation, flawed, misunderstood, or abused advances, science, technology, and suppression of emotions. Remember, this is from the winter of 2013. The authors continued the recent explosion in dystopian literature for young adults interests us in large part because these new titles include similar themes and conventions as classic works in the genre. And so they talk about their process. Like I said, we're not going to get into that. Looking to see if they name the type of study. They're basically doing a content analysis, I would say. But they've got a list of title studies and prominent elements for classroom analysis, including platonic or romantic relationship, excessive measures to police society, pressure to conform, and media manipulation or propaganda. And that's, of course, in the row, the top row. And then the first column is a list of different shorts or different novels, like Across the Universe by Beth Revis, Birthmarked by Kara M. O'Brien, skipping down, Divergent by Veronica Roth. Let's see, the Hunger Games series, Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. I read that a few years ago and really enjoyed it. Uglies by Scott Westerfield, and Unwind by Neil Shusterman, among others. And then we also have measures to cover up flaws and lies in society. Yes, I went through this whole list a minute ago, so we have all of this. And so the authors continue to talk about that, and then they say the results of our analysis started us thinking that these books fulfilled a special role for teenagers, given their unique situations straddling childhood and adulthood. Some of the first connections we made were related to understandings of adolescent development, and these helped explain some of the popularity of these titles. We also looked at specific literary elements within these books and examined their impact. Finally, we considered what these findings might suggest for us as teachers and how the conclusions we reached through this study might inform classroom practice. And so, under the first heading, the authors say, the heading is Adolescent Development in Dystopian Literature, and the authors say the setting, themes, and characters in dystopian fiction are an appropriate fit with the intellectual changes that occur during adolescence. So now we're going to talk about, why adolescents are the way they are. As adolescents develop, they are able to grasp bigger, more abstract concepts and consequences of the world around them and can engage in more critical thinking. They also show increasing interest in issues related to society at large, according to Larson and Richards in 1994 and Steinberg in 2005. Dystopian novels that wrestle with deeper societal and moral issues are often well received by young minds that are developing the ability and even willingness to grapple with complex ideas. Um, they continue. This includes career possibilities and lifestyle choices, but also more abstract systems such as moral standards and social norms. Morally, adolescents are moving from the black and white view of children toward a more nuanced view of adults, and the large number of significant transitions they experience can lead to uncertainty about their identities and futures, according to Carrig, Schultz, and Hauser, 2011, and Steinberg, 2005. This uncertainty and questioning is part of the process through which teenagers develop their own set of values. Dystopian fiction features protagonists who are likewise questioning the underlying values of a flawed society and their identity within it, who they are going to be and how they're going to act. Every choice the characters make can carry enormous consequences, often to the point of significantly altering the world they've always known. Teenagers connect with these protagonists as they feel a similar weight on their shoulders. And like I said in my letter or my email, this is a safe place. The pages of a book, a classroom where, there's an adult and other teenagers to talk about these concerns and talk about these choices is, like I said, a safe place to experience vicariously making choices and deciding what one is going to do and who one wants to be. So specific elements that appeal to teens is the next section. And the authors say the connections between adolescent development and dystopian fiction highlight certain patterns that emerge from our analysis of these titles. I'm going to skip to the end of this paragraph. To supplement our own analysis, one of the authors queried some of his 7th and 8th grade students about the reasons they found these books appealing. We've included some of the responses in the following discussion. Anyway, one of the elements is inhumanity and isolation. Whatever the backdrop of the dystopia, a violent society, a tyrannical government, an over-commercialized world, the protagonists come to understand that their society has become inhumane. They are appalled by the attitudes and actions of those within their culture, sickened of the complacency and even the open coldness of others towards situations that are cruel and unjust. As protagonists awaken to the realities around them, they feel an overwhelming sense that life has lost the value that it once had in the world. Respect for life has been sacrificed for comfort or security. In YA dystopian novels, it is often this inhumanity that pushes the protagonist to action. And so we have, as an example, the book called Birthmarked by O'Brien, 2010. And the authors talk about how this book is an example of of inhumanity and isolation. And then there's The Hunger Games, and also Little Brother by Dr. Rao, 2008. Again, that's a book that I read a few years ago, well, also in The Hunger Games. I haven't read Birthmarked yet, so I'm going to have to add that one to my list. The authors also say these protagonists' growing understanding of society around them mirrors important growth taking place for teen readers. All right, agency and conscience, the brink of adulthood. Many YA novels and short stories feature a protagonist who is faced with challenges, external or internal, and who must overcome those challenges as part of a coming of age or establishing an identity. Dystopian YA novels feature a similar motif, with the challenges faced often arising from the failures of society. And so I'm thinking about the short stories that I have in my library. And some of the ones I'm thinking in particular include, and I'm going to do this alphabetically, so I'm going to have to scroll through my list. There are some stories in here that have grown-ups in them, like To Be or Ought to Be by Kurt Vonnegut. That, again, the protagonist is grown. All Summer in a Day, though, by Ray Bradbury, is a science fiction short story that transports us to Venus, where the sun only shines for 2 hours every 7 years, which is quite the weather shock. The plot revolves around Margot, a young girl from Earth, and her classmates who've never seen sunlight. Margot, who remembers Earth's sunlight, is eagerly awaiting the brief summer. However, her classmates, jealous and unable to comprehend her experiences, lock her in a closet. And I'll stop there. Um, there's Amigo Brothers. It's a heartwarming tale by Perry Thomas, revolving around two best friends, Antonio and Felix, both superb boxers from New York City. Here's the twist. They have to fight each other in the division boxing final. So you can see how that got dark. The Bass of the River and Sheila Mant by W.D. Wetherell is a poignant coming of age tale about the agonizing, I cannot talk today, about the agonizing choices of adolescence. Our protagonist is a 14-year-old boy torn between his passion for bass fishing and his crush on the sophisticated, indifferent Sheila Mant. Again, took a dark turn. Let's scroll through. Then we have Charles. It's a whimsical short story by Shirley Jackson. If you're familiar with her work, you know that this is going to take a dark turn. But it revolves around Lori, a kindergartner with a flair for tall tales. And let's see, what else do we have? Most of these have grown-ups in them. Well, Harrison Bergeron is probably a grown-up. He's seems like he might be. Oh no, he is a teenager. Okay, so Harrison Bergeron. Um, The Last Dog by Catherine Patterson. The stirring exploration of friendship and curiosity set in a future world. In it, we meet Brock, a young boy living in a high-tech dome designed to protect humans from the supposedly toxic outside environment. So the word supposedly is a key there. Uh, so let's see, what else do we have? So yeah, we have some stories in here that feature young adults. Names Nombres by Julia Alvarez, a delightful autobiographical story that explores the struggles of cultural identity and assimilation. And so yeah, the possibility of evil. While the main character, Miss Strangeworth, is an adult, there are some teenagers in this story that feature strongly in the ending. We have Raymond's Run, Rules of the Game, The Scholarship Jacket, Seventh Grade. So yeah, these all have some, or several of them anyway. I mean, not all of them, but several of them feature young adults is either the protagonist or heavily influencing the ending. So these are stories that are appropriate for teenagers. Now, as I mentioned, the educator who reached out is a fifth grade teacher, and I can see how some of these darker dystopian themes might not be appropriate for fifth grade yet. Um, but I feel like fifth grade is really, fourth and fifth graders tend to be starting to ask questions and kind of looking askance at, society around them. It's not really until 13, 14, well, particularly 15 and 16 that um, teenagers are really needing to have safe ways to explore their perceptions and explore their own morality and identity and what have you. And so, anyway, agency and conscious, the brink of adulthood. So we have some examples of that. The authors say that this notion of a protagonist's agency mirrors teens' own growing sense of their role as agents in a larger community. And so we have relationships, both platonic and romantic. The protagonists of YA dystopias gradually develop a sense of agency and potential influence as they become aware of the flaws in their society. While this growing awareness can isolate them from others around them, the actions they take and even their increased understanding the truth are often aided by a relationship of some kind with another character in the story. This relationship, sometimes romantic, provides a catalyst for both the protagonist's changing perceptions about the society and his or her willingness to take action that runs counter to the conventions of that society. And the author gives us some examples. And then we have the place of YA dystopian literature in the classroom, which this is, I would say, the most important part of the article. Once you understand what dystopian literature is and why it's important for teenagers or why teenagers gravitate towards it, uh, That all signals some important implications for teachers and librarians, according to the authors. They write, we see that these novels can withstand serious literary scrutiny. So if you're worried about the rigor or um, the seriousness of the works, then we've got you covered. And perhaps they deserve a place alongside the study of other classic dystopian pieces such as Orwell's 1984 or Huxley's Brave New World. In fact, the dystopian pieces we discuss here bear striking similarities to these classics, and studying a YA dystopian novel or short story would certainly provide an effective bridge to a classic piece, as has been suggested in the past by Hirsch and Gallo in 2005 and Joan Cawell in 1993. And they continue. The novels discussed here provide rich opportunities for discussion about the role government can and should play in our lives, and the responsibility individuals have for ensuring that justice and humanity are preserved by those in power. We could use dystopian literature to build cross-curricular connections between the English class and a government or civics course, with the thematic unit exploring the purpose and role that government should play. The authors continue, this dystopian novel doesn't need to be so close to our reality in order to provide meaningful exploration of significant topics. However, and then they talk about how some of the novels raise important questions about human rights and the value of human life. And then the authors say the richness of many of these novels argues for their study in the the ELA classroom, whether independently or coupled with a dystopian classic. So that's one of my favorite things to do, is set up a unit that maybe is a dystopian unit, and then give students the ability to choose what they want to read within that context. And so they can communicate with their families and communities. And of course, I'm usually aware of the community expectations, so I can make some informed choices about what options students might have available to them. One of the most important things to do is communicate with your school librarian to find out, what they have available, and partner with them, partner with the other teachers, have a discussion with your admin to find out what is available. But again, in terms of novels, but again, each of these short stories are ones that either I have taught or other teachers have taught. They've all been vetted by educators and have been taught in English classrooms for years. Many of them have also been included in printed textbooks that I've, had access to since at least 2011. Some of these were in textbooks or provided to me by my teachers a long time ago. We won't go into the years. So anyway, the authors continue. For teachers and librarians both, we feel strongly that the connections between these novels and teens' lives and concerns argue for a need to showcase these books or short stories as we converse with teens about their reading. While the same could be said of most YA literature, dystopian literature seems to speak particularly strongly to teens at this time and the choices and challenges they face as they move toward adulthood. One of the first things I noticed when I entered the classroom is it was a struggle. I struggled to get my students engaged in reading, and I very quickly figured out that stories like The Landlady or The Lottery really engaged them. The River and Sheila Man, To Build a Fire. These dystopian stories were very interesting to them. It pulled them in. They read, they argued, they discussed, they did all the things that we as adults do as part of our reading lives. And that's what we're looking for. That's what we want. So my question for you all then is, if we are looking for stories that aren't dystopian, that maybe fit into some other genres and that are not as dark, what do you recommend? What short stories do you teach that your students love, but that would not fall into this dark or dystopian genre? I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Again, I'm Michelle Boyd Waters, and I'm a scholar of adolescent literacy, writing pedagogy, and student-centered learning. So looking forward to hearing from you.